On the morning of September the 19th, 1985, a great earthquake struck Mexico City, and it was felt as far away as Tepoztlan, the little town where I was staying. The earthquake brought the vision forcibly to my mind, and I spoke it later that morning for the first time to my wife, Khadija Muhammad, and to Sister Tainetta Muhammad.
Greetings. Today is February the 2nd, 2023. Last night I attended a believers meeting as a member of the Nation of Islam, and there was some discrepancies about a date, something that took place on a date of September the 19th, 1985. That is a very significant date, and I will go into that, and I will hope that this will be helpful to Minister Ishmael Muhammad and the believers in the Nation of Islam. We are now approaching our annual convention of Saviors Day, and I would like to wish everyone in the Nation of Islam and our supporters happy Saviors Day, and Assalamu Alaikum. I would ask that anyone that is watching this that is not a member of the Nation of Islam, take what you can get out of it. This should be very informative. Again, my name is Brother Leroy Shabazz. I'm an emergency management practitioner in the city of Cincinnati, Ohio. This certificate shows that I am a particularly qualified to teach a program called CERT, Community Emergency Response Teams, and that is a priority of mine. And as we move on, I want to show you this next certificate in reference to all emergency management agency persons are not required but are encouraged to learn about religious and cultural literacy, particularly dealing with disasters. So the fact that I'm going to speak as a student in the Nation of Islam under the leadership of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Most Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, don't get it twisted. That's just the reality of my religious and cultural experience, and I am qualified to do what I'm doing and say what I'm saying. And if you would like to, you can go to femap.news, femap.news, and at the top of that you'll see a link that would get you to a transcript of other courses I've taken since 2010 in reference to FEMA and emergency management, disaster preparedness reality. Moving on. In 2010, during the Saviors Day event, Minister Farrakhan encouraged the believers to learn emergency management. Matter of fact, let's listen to what he specifically said.
Condition that you're in. But I'm telling you, when I finish this lecture today, come on. God is going to answer what I said. Listen. You'll see the wheels over the major cities, and the chastisement is going to increase, and there will be earthquakes in America like you saw in Haiti, like you saw in Chile, like there was in Japan. You're going to have to learn emergency management. You don't know how to protect your life. You don't know what to do when disaster strikes. If Haiti had been more prepared, lives could have been saved. Your day and mine here is coming.
So the Honorable Minister Farrakhan did tell us to learn emergency management. He did not say learn disaster preparedness, but I'm not going to harp on that right now. It's very important that we understand he did say learn emergency management. And those of us that did go out and learn about emergency management, because everybody wasn't required or encouraged to do that, but those who did, we have something to say in reference to some very important information. So this video, I want to very important issues that there's a vital difference between disaster preparedness and emergency management. I think the nation has really gotten to the point where we think disaster preparedness is what it's all about, but that's really not the case. And again, as a community emergency response team instructor, I want you to know about CERT, because this will help you to avoid or survive FEMA camps, because that is going to take place. People in the Nation of Islam are going to potentially be in FEMA camps, more than likely, because we haven't done some of the things that we needed to do over the last few years. This slide right here, this shows you that when you look at disaster preparedness in reference to the difference between disaster preparedness and emergency management, on the left you see where it's like, make a kid have a plan, be informed. That's basic disaster preparedness, right? On the other side you have make a kid have a plan, be informed, but establish a network. That's very important that you look at that and see that that's a reality toward dealing with emergency management. I need you to understand that there's individual readiness and then that there is community readiness. What I do and others do is try to function as emergency managers. And what an emergency manager does is this. Emergency management is the managerial function charged with creating the framework within which communities reduce vulnerabilities to threats, hazards, and cope with disasters. Now I'm going to add a little bit to that as I read it again. Emergency management is the managerial function charged with creating the framework within which communities, organizations, nations reduce their vulnerability to threats, hazards, and cope with disasters. It's not just an individual thing when you're looking at emergency management. It's much more to it. We need to realize that there's more to emergency management than just being disaster prepared as an individual. Now, I'm not going to take the time in this video to go over what NIMS is and the National Preparedness Goal. I'm not going to do that because more than likely you're not really even interested in that. I'm not going to tell you about the 5 frameworks and the 32 core capabilities, because more than likely as believers and as common people, you're not interested in that. And most likely what you're waiting for if something happens is for white people to show up and to help you out. That's not a good thing, and that's not what I would tell you to do as an emergency manager. I could tell you about the emergency support functions, the essential support functions that are part of disaster preparedness and emergency management, but you're not probably going to be interested in that. I could tell you about the National Incident Management System, how it changed from what happened in 2008 after it was originated from what happened on 9/11, and I could tell you how it changed in 2017. Which was some very important changes, but I'm not going to tell you about that because you wouldn't be interested and it would take a long period of time. I could tell you that 2008 and 2017 changed, and as you look at this, there was preparedness, and then 2017, there was not preparedness, it was about response. These are significant changes, but I'm not going to go into all of that right now. I'm just going to move on. Another thing about fundamental concepts that took place and changed from 2008 and 2017 NIMS. Notice that all of a sudden there was this something called unity of effort. And I would say to you and to others, unity of effort to do what? And this is really what it amounts to for the black community. There's some stuff coming down the pipe, and we really need to understand what that's all about. Moving on. So let's look at what did happen September the 19th, 1985. What did take place on that date in Mexico was a great earthquake. And you can see that earthquake was a large earthquake. Over 5,000 people were killed, and a lot of people were killed because they were trying to help others. So at that point in time, what the government of Mexico did was they began to teach their people about how to help deal with rescuing people without getting yourself killed. They began to teach their people about how to triage people until proper help can arrive, medical help can arrive to help and save the lives of their people. And that's where the CERT program came from. It might not necessarily have been called CERT in Mexico, but that's what we have today. Now, what happened on that particular day, as Minister Farrakhan tells us, is that particular earthquake, an event brought to him the remembrance of something that took place on September the 17th. He had an experience that he calls more than a vision, where he was brought to a wheel. As a matter of fact, or it's commonly known today as a UFO. Now, let me just touch base on that real quick. If you don't know, you should know now that the United States government, as of last year, recognizes UFOs publicly. They don't necessarily say UFOs, they call it unidentified aerial phenomenon. But and also, I stayed over in a training in October of 2022. I went to a emergency management agency training in Columbus, Ohio, and I stayed over an extra day to talk to the people from the emergency management agency to let them know that I would be talking about UFOs and those type of things right there, like that. And of course, they recognize that this is a reality that we have to deal with nowadays. So again, going back to my point before I drifted off there, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on September the 17th had a vision where he was taken aboard a wheel, and he spoke with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave him specific instructions about a war that was planned against, a war that was being planned by the Reagan administration.
He said, and I quote, "President Reagan has met with the Joint Chiefs of Staff to plan a war. I want you to hold a press conference in Washington, D.C. and announce their plan and say to the world that you got the information from me on the wheel."
So as I move into this next slide, I'm going to play some information and some short videos. Now, what I'm about to do right now is like threading the camel through a needle, but please try to follow with me through this, because we'll be able to accomplish a great deal if we can get through these short videos and be intact. So I'm going to play some short videos and make some brief points about what happened in that Reagan administration that is important to disaster preparedness and emergency management issues for us to this very day. This very first video is going to be about particularly what happened with this guy named Giuffrida, who came in as Reagan's FEMA administrator, and he also years before had wrote a paper about interning black people in FEMA camps like they did the Japanese. You can go to FEMA.news and hit the documents link, and the second document there is that paper. And on page 32 of that paper, you'll see where he even points out that Martin Luther King, 6 days before he was assassinated, pointed out that he felt like he can see his people being interned in the communities in like a FEMA camp situation. So this is not a far-fetched reality, and I hope we can follow through. Here's the first video.
Giuffrida, North, and George Bush began to turn FEMA into an instrument of domestic anti-terrorism.
You're dealing with a group of people in the Reagan administration who equated political dissent with treason, and who cannot differentiate between emergency procedures, which I think everyone agrees are necessary, and suppressing political dissent. And with North and Poindexter and Casey, you had a group of people who saw Americans who disagree with them as the enemy.
Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you not touch upon that, sir?
I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution, and I was deeply concerned about it. and wondered if that was the area in which he had worked. I believe that it was, but I wanted to get his
May I most
confirmation.
respectfully request that that matter not be touched upon.
Okay, so that video really has a lot in it. Potential suspension of the Constitution. You notice that Oliver North was there, who dealt with the crack cocaine realities and pushing it into the communities. That video shows that there was some planning back in that Reagan administration to do some things. And this next video goes right into the fact that this is me calling into a show to speak to an FBI agent who deals with situations relative to the crack cocaine distribution in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I live at. And I'll go right into that at this point.
I am a student. I am a registered student. So I'm studying, brother. But I do have work to do in reference to disaster preparedness.
Well, I'm familiar with FEMA as well, and the preparedness. I did something on that some years ago. It's ever going, but the destruction that's inevitable, only God Himself is going to be able to save that. So I'll let Dr. Powers respond to you. Obviously, we knew he was an FBI agent in Cincinnati and Detroit and other places. He's a professor now, but I'm glad he can respond. And you can leave your number off the air just in case Doc want to talk to you, okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
All right, my brother. Go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, and I tried to explain to the Cincinnati community at that time, Brother Manier, that this disaster was coming. And what the brother's saying, I spoke on a radio program there at some peril to me in my career, indicating that Ricky Ross, who was actually given crack to distribute across the nation because the CIA couldn't get into the communities, was in Cincinnati. He was in Lincoln Heights, Ohio. I even worked a case against Ricky Ross, and he began to put so much drug on the streets in Cincinnati, which was it wasn't drug free, but it certainly wasn't a disaster.
It certainly wasn't like that
back then, and we knew it. And I was working the cases, and they simply never authorized an arrest against him, and there's so much more to that. I won't get into that right now. They never of that. So, and as you're right, this has been a plan from the beginning, but what I've always tried to do, Brother Manier, and I'm glad the brother said that, because it's not a new thing for me, was try to lay out that if we do not make some moves now, and as the messenger said, if we don't do not to take control of ours now, this is only going to get progressively worse, and that's a clear indication of what is happening in a city like Cincinnati, and the shooting of 100 times of the guy up in Cleveland, and the 40-some murders here in Baltimore. That's all predictable, and the messenger predicted it. We just didn't heed it, and we're just not doing enough to stop it.
That was a 2017 event where I called in and spoke to this show. Again, if you hear what Dr. Powers is saying, he's saying the messenger, and he's referring to the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So happy Savior's Day, Dr. Powers, and we wish you the best. There's a lot there. Most recently here in Cincinnati, Freeway Rick Ross has been talking to people over a radio show, and people are really lauding Freeway Rick like he really did something. And I'm not speaking to the brother's hustle, but these Negroes got it twisted. They won't, and I can't get anybody to go contact Dr. Powers and bring him to the city in reference to having some communication about what actually did happen when he tried to arrest Freeway Rick Ross. Why wouldn't the police and the FBI allow him to initiate that reality? So there's a lot to that, but again, this is very important information that's not being dealt with, and our people is going to perish due to lack of knowledge, and we need to deal with that. Moving on to this next video, because again, I'm trying to deal with what an emergency manager does is he looks at the potential of threats and hazards, and if they're likely to occur again. So I'm giving you a threat assessment, looking back over some things, and I'm saying, whoa, this is leading up to this, and this is leading up to this, and so here we go with this next one that deals with what happened on the day of 9/11, and the reality of 9/11 has been a situation where it put into play a Department of Homeland Security and certain things that cause a certain lockdown and a tightening of freedoms and restrictions. So let me play this next clip and move on.
This is the Empire State Building, a marvel of modern architecture. It was built to last. Architects and engineers of today use computers to design and engineer buildings that will endure the forces of nature, such as earthquakes, fires, and hurricanes. This modern skyscraper was also built to last. We've seen buildings completely destroyed like this before, but only when done intentionally. Danny Jowenko is the expert on this in Europe. What did he say?
Dit is controlled demolition. Zeker weten. Zeker weten. Er is nagesprongen. Dit is in opdracht gebeurd. Het heeft een team gedaan van experts.
Let's compare. Explosives are used to demolish buildings like this in just seconds. Okay, so it's a controlled demolition. What's the problem with that? Well, it happened on the afternoon of 9/11 at the World Trade Center.
So that leads to the reality that there's some questionable stuff going on, and then there's a cadre of Caucasian people who are about to confront another cadre of Caucasian people about some stuff in the near future. And that's why you hear certain things like warp speed, because people are moving ahead with plans, and we don't want to get caught up in the funk. Trying to move forward. Okay, moving forward to this next slide. Okay. Am I actually move forward? Please bear with me on these, because this is a PowerPoint presentation that I'm doing, and I like to have some motion in the slide as I continue to move forward, so I know that it is recording. So again, I spoke about the National Incident Management System and changes that took place in 2017. Again, I don't need to go over that, but there was something going on with preparedness back in the day, and then all of a sudden there's response. And I would like to share with Brother Ishmael, again, there was another earthquake that took place September the 19th, 2017. And that earthquake was a lesson of an impact. It was a lesser of an earthquake, a bit smaller, but there was only 360 deaths. And I like to attribute some of that to the fact that the CERT teams were out being effective, and the government, of course, had taken certain precautions with building and construction realities, right? Again, the CERT program is very important again. And Brother Ishmael related to the fact that we know as students in the Nation of Islam who makes rain, hail, snow, and earthquake, and what brings rain, hail, snow, and earthquake. So again, cause and effect is very important in the reality of this earthquake situation. And I didn't say nothing, I didn't say this particular point in the first slide where the minister said that the earthquake brought the vision back to his memory. But again, cause and effect is very important in this, what I'm pointing out at this point. Moving forward. At this point, in reference to that 2017 reference, right, I like to kind of look at what was going on within the years around there and what was taking place, right? And this is going to lead into this first video where this is some profound stuff where Bill Gates is talking about this potential virus stuff that was taking place, potentially could take place. Here we go.
Today, the greatest of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes. Now, part of the reason for this is that we've invested a huge amount in nuclear deterrence. But we've actually invested very little in a system to stop an epidemic. We're not ready for the next epidemic. You can have a virus where people feel well enough while they're infectious that they get on a plane or they go to a market. The source of the virus could be a natural epidemic like Ebola, or it could be bioterrorism. And so there are things that would literally make things 1,000 times worse. In fact, let's look at a model of a virus spread through the air like the Spanish flu back in 1918. So here's what would happen. It would spread throughout the world very, very quickly. And you can see there's over 30 million people die from that epidemic. So this is a serious problem. We should be concerned. But in fact, we can build a really good response system. We have the benefits of all the science and technology that we talk about here. We've got cell phones to get information from the public and get information out to them. We have satellite maps where we can see where people are and where they're moving. We have advances in biology that should dramatically change the turnaround time to look at a pathogen and be able to make drugs and vaccines that fit for that pathogen. So we can have tools, but those tools need to be put into an overall global health system, and we need preparedness. The best lessons, I think, on how to get prepared are, again, what we do for war. For soldiers, we have full-time waiting to go. We have reserves that can scale us up to large numbers. NATO has a mobile unit that can deploy very rapidly. NATO does a lot of war games to check, are people well trained? Do they understand about fuel and logistics and the same radio frequencies? So they are absolutely ready to go.
Very interesting things took place after this 2015 presentation, and what got put into place with the reality of COVID that has taken place is that there's a system in place that we just looked at the first phase of some stuff right now. There's some other phases that are coming along, and we need to be better prepared for that. There's a lot of times that you'll hear people in the Nation of Islam and ministers and preachers or whatever talking about, for example, National Security Survey Memorandum 200, where it talks about what the government is going to do, and the government is doing stuff, and not necessarily government, good government, but some wicked people or shadow government is doing some stuff. And the thing is, ministers can stand in front of the podium and talk about it, but what are you doing about it? And that's what's important. What are you going to do? So this next video real quick is in 2018, our CERT team was preparing for an event where we were teaching people how to make a kit, have a plan, be informed. This particular day, we're having an event about making a kit. That's what we wanted to have people understand, how to make a kit. That was us letting people know initially about how to be disaster prepared. So here's this video, and what's important in this video is I am actually talking about the fact that, wow, I'm hearing that there are people coming to give us shots. It's a very short video, but this is 2018. Here we go. So we want to invite you out. Again, we're March 24, 2018. The major priority for our day is to make a kit. We're talking about the concept of making a kit. We want you to understand that the three concepts of make a kit, have a plan, and stay informed. But the March 24th event primarily is about having you understand the concept of making a kit. Besides the contest, we're hoping to have people from the Cincinnati Fire Department. Hoping Anson Turley, Chief Anson Turley will send someone out to speak about disaster preparedness. We're hoping to hear from someone from the Hamilton County Emergency Management Agency, and I'm hoping to hear from someone from the Health Collaborative, which is a Caucasian organization that has gotten its ability to do some disaster preparedness, and it's going to be a controlling organization. And I'm concerned with who these people are, because I'm really concerned about who these white folks are that just showed up and have an ability to do controls of shops and this, that, the other. I have a concern about that. So if they want to send someone out to talk to the community about who they are and what they're capable of doing, I'd appreciate it. Again, I'm looking at 2018 and I'm saying that, whoa, these folks are coming to give us shots. Again, my motion and my action as an emergency management practitioner is from the instructions of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in 2010 to not let certain things happen to our people again, like what happened with Katrina, this, that, the other, and the Haitian earthquake. So I'm on my job, and we'll just struggle along a little more. And hopefully utilize this CERT program that again came from that 2019 event, that September the 19th event that Minister Ishmael alluded to at the Believers meeting. Again, moving on, and I'm going to move right through these next videos because I think we could pretty much have slept a lot on the COVID piece. We just missed a whole opportunity. But this next two videos is in reference to a power grid failure. And brothers and sisters, that's going to wipe a new butthole for a lot of people. I mean, there is like, if we don't get on top of this, people are, you know, when I tell people, most recently I told my local minister, right, you know, people are about to go to FEMA camps when the power grid goes out. I met with the Metropolitan House and they said like, after 3 or 4 weeks, the people can't stay there. They got to go somewhere. And I'm like, this is something we need to be on. And, you know, when I told him that and I've told other people that, they just look at me like, well, good luck, Brother Leroy. And which, I mean, it's like nobody's understanding that this stuff is going to happen. So let's move on with this video and let you get a taste of this.
Electricity for months at a time.
So are they saying they don't view it urgently?
What I'm saying is there's no plan. There are plans for hurricanes, there are plans for snowstorms, there are plans for earthquakes. There is no plan for a cyber attack that would be infinitely longer in duration and more widespread than any of those natural disasters.
You went and interviewed, you sat down with the head of Homeland Security,
I did.
Secretary Johnson. What did he say when you asked him about the plan? The lack of one.
He pointed up at a bunch of white binders in his office and he said, I'm sure there's a plan up there somewhere. And I said, well, don't you think it would be smart to get that plan out to the public before there is a massive break in electrical power? And he said, look, I mean, this is a relatively simple thing. You need a radio, you need a battery-powered radio. Mm-hmm. My question is, when the power goes out, what are we going to tell people on those battery-powered
You even used the word that
Ted,
it got a little prickly.
He did get a little prickly, yeah.
Ted, I just want to say, we did also reach out to DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, and we got a full page of details about what they would do in the case of an attack. And they said, you know, how they'd coordinate with FEMA and local officials, that they're working with the private.
I want to just interrupt right here because, again, that's where the CERT program comes in at this phase right here when they coordinate with FEMA and local officials. That's where your CERT team is supposed to be to make sure that your community is prepared to go through whatever. And if we're not there, if our community is not utilizing this program, then there is some plans to show up at 3 o'clock in the morning, turn on some floodlights, and tell people, particularly in public housing, get on the bus. We can't keep you here no more. And this is just terrible for us to have to allow our people to go through that. So again, with the CERT program, you still may have to get on the bus and go somewhere if you ain't got no food, you ain't got no water, you ain't got no electricity in a situation. However, there's a possibility that with your CERT training, you actually would be connected to the system as an operator as opposed to some passive person dealing with it. And hopefully you would have people like myself, who's a ham radio operator, and Brother Paul Muhammad in Atlanta, who's a ham radio operator, or those who have been trained to work ham radio so that wherever they take you, you can utilize your radio and equipment to call back to let us know that you're okay, to let us know that nobody's gotten lost, so that we are aware of what's going on with you. And in situations where you need something, we can get resources to you and coordinate our processes of surviving the situation. And if the people don't want to cooperate, that's when we come put foot up somebody's rear end to make things happen. It's not no cute pansy type of stuff that I'm talking about. We need to get ready for some real things to happen. So let me continue with this video.
Sector for more resources in support. I think to your point, if the lights went out it's more than just the lights. Explain what could actually happen to people if there's a massive cyber attack.
Well, in a place like Manhattan, for example, if the power goes out, you know how the fire department and the police spend the first couple of days? Getting people out of stalled elevators. You're talking about a community of, what, 8 million people? The food in a place like Manhattan would run out in a couple of days. New York State has several million MREs, meals ready to eat. But when you take several million and you divide it by 8 million, you're talking about maybe a 2 or 3 day food supply. What happens on day 4?
Yeah.
What happens on
Who
day
in this
10?
country is prepared?
Again, I'm going to just move on to the next slide. There's a lot to unpack from that, what was just said, but I'm going to move on to the next slide. This slide particularly is someone who had posted some information regarding Janet Napolitano, who had resigned from the Department of Homeland Security as the secretary. Now, here's what Janet Napolitano had to say about disaster, about a Cyber 11 or a power grid failure.
This is something she's been really talking about. It's been a major talking point of hers. A Cyber 9/11 is what she's calling it. So she's recalling that imagery.
A super disaster.
A super disaster. I came across this clip of her at the Wilson Center back on June 5th. They uploaded this. And I'm just going to go ahead and really quickly play this clip.
You've said that a Cyber 9/11 is not an if, but a when. What would a Cyber 9/11 look like, and how soon could it happen?
It could happen imminently. What would it look like? It could take many forms, but let me just give one that may come to mind, which is what happens when the electric grid goes down. You know, we saw that during Sandy, and you see how that impacts everything from the ability to heat homes, to the ability to pump gasoline, to the ability to have lighting at night, everything. So when we look at the nation's critical infrastructure and where it is vulnerable, one of the vulnerabilities is through the cyber and the networked cyber world that we live in.
So there you have her talking about not just a Cyber 9/11, but specifically a Cyber 9/11 that's going to knock out our power grid.
Okay. I would think that the Department of Homeland Security Secretary has some ideas of what's going to happen in a profound manner. Moving on. Okay, this is actually the last slide. Again, I stress as an emergency management practitioner that CERTs, community emergency response teams, be utilized, and for the 10,000 fielders, if you've taken the CERT training, you got a good start. If you've done it and you've actually completed the CERT training, it asks you to take IS 100, which is a FEMA training course, and ICS 700, which is another FEMA training course that teach you some very important information that you need to know to understand how the system is worked, because we need to be prepared by utilizing the system or the umbilical cord to get through what's about to happen. IS 1300 is a very important reality to get through. And let's look at what this CERT thing does real quick. When I train people, I ask them, now what is a CERT? And they should be able to tell me a CERT is a disaster asset and an extension of first responders. That's what you become when you take this basic training. And then you continue to train and work with each other as a group or an organization. But you are a disaster asset because now you have certain levels of training. You know something about disaster preparedness. You know something about command and capacity, so that when something happens, you know where to get information from and who's supposed to be able to deal with resources and things that you need. You know something about fire safety and light search and rescue in order to save people from certain situations. You know something about medical operations in order to triage people. Disaster psychology, which is a very important topic that I would like to go into when I do another presentation after this one. And then, of course, terrorism, which I've talked about in reference to being an intentional disaster of war or terrorism, which again is really white supremacy fits right up under that framework. On the other side, you can see where you become an extension of first responders, because you can do things if you're not dealing with a disaster. Your organization that's actually actually an organization that's active and able to do something, you're mitigating all hazards by looking at what can potentially happen in your neighborhood, from natural disasters, technological disasters, and intentional disasters, and you're finding ways to lessen the impact of that. You have preset communication. For example, when that grid does go down, you know who to contact in reference to what needs to be put where. Community emergency operation plans need to be in place. Community resilience is a very important to bounce back starting from day one after the event. As the event happens, you start to get resiliently in the process of bouncing back. A mutual aid agreement. What is a mutual aid agreement? For example, if the power grid does go down, it's going to be maybe some days before you can get some resources. So have you made a mutual aid agreement with the Krogers down the street as your CERT team, to have it signed off with the EMA, the police, and everybody, so that they know that your team, when something happens, is about to go down there, they're going to get the baby formula, the milk, and whatever they need, and the diapers for the babies in the neighborhood. So it's not like you're just running and people breaking into stuff, right? So there's some things that we can do that would help us to be prepared for what's going. There's some things that we're going to have to do. And again, reducing crime and violence. You know, I was actually told by a firefighter official that when I was getting our CERT team together, and we had chickens and bees and a garden at New Prospect Baptist Church, and I was talking about how we had people from the home school coming to check out the bees and the chickens and stuff, and I was talking about how, yeah, we do this and we can work with kids to reduce crime and violence. I was told that CERT ain't supposed to be about reducing crime and violence. So, man, these folks is off the chain. So we need to better understand the importance of this CERT program. So coming out of there real quick, again, this is the last slide. I really want to point out that if you have taken this training, it is very important. You are a very important person in the community. Utilize the CERT program. This is what came out in September the 1985 situation. The CERT program came out of that. And brothers, if you guys are actually married, specifically with an MGT wife, man, you should be starting to utilize your dinner table to build strong relationships, because you know the minister, when he came back and built the nation of Islam back, or brought the nation Islam back, you would always hear him after his lectures inviting people to his home and to the dinner table to establish relationships. And there's a certain thing when you take that IS 13, and I'll say this and move on. When you take that IS 1300 course, Introduction to Community Operations, it talks about introduction to continuity of ops. That's what that introduction to continuity of ops. And it gives you this definition. Continuity is a critical part of every organization's mission to ensure the continuation of their essential functions and services during a broad range of circumstances. So the government, no matter what it does, is going to have continuity of operation. That's its bottom line, to make sure that they maintain control. But you, as brothers, sitting at your dinner tables with your families, what you want to do is maintain continuity of family, because that leads to continuity of community, and continuity of neighborhood, and continuity of nation. And again, I don't have to continue to harp on that, do I? Moving on, last point I want to make here is that it says ready for whatever. And let's talk about that number 4. But again, the first 3 causes of disasters are, there are natural disasters, which are your earthquake, hurricane, mudslide, tornado. We need to be ready for those, because this is the functionality of the planet. And that's the reality that we need to know how our planet works. This is what we're given the supreme wisdom for, so we can learn about our planet and our universe and get back in control of it. We need to know about technological disasters, which are like your chemical spills, your train derailment, your factory explosion. We need to know that these things are potentially able to happen, and what do we need to do to save our community from the threats and hazards of that. We are not professional firefighters. We are just people in the community as CERTs who actually are able to take a stand and make sure our community is covered and not wait for other people to come do stuff for us. Okay, and of course I talked about intentional disasters, which again looks at terrorism and war, but I clearly pointed out that white supremacy and the work of the devils is really a part of that intentional stuff that we need to be aware of. And again, clearly, when I use the term supreme emergency management, is because the fourth cause of disasters, which is divine intervention, is something that we really need to give respect to. In our study guides in the Nation of Islam, the minister points out how at the end of when a nation is judged, there's always a remnant. This comes out of the Quran, where there's a remnant of people who come out of the nation that is being destroyed. And that's a very important reality for us to know, because what's going to make us last forever as a nation is we're going to have respect for that fourth cause of the disasters, which is divine intervention. So, and then if we understand divine intervention and the reality that this old nation is coming about going down, then what we really need to be moving is, what is the next phase of the new nation? And again, that takes us to the reality of all nations start that first phase with an agricultural phase. So the CERT teams need to be connected with agriculture and pushing agriculture out there to the community, be it farmer market, this, that, the other. I'm not going to go all into that, but there was a YouTube channel with some brothers called B1 Ag, B1 and the letters AG, that I did some presentations on. Please, if you get a chance, go look at B1 Ag and see those presentations, and I'm looking forward to seeing them back on the air and active. So again, the CERT team needs to be, I can go on and on about the potential of that, but I'll end this, and again, happy Savior's Day. I'm looking forward to getting the Savior's Day. If anyone wants to, let me see. Does this go back? Let me say this last point. Again, September the 19th, there were earthquakes that took place in 1985, September the 19th, 2017, and September the 19th, 2022. And again, we realize that there's nothing spooky about that. There might be a message in it. And if you added up this 1985 and 2012, 2017 and 2022, those numbers would add out to be across, if you added them up across, they would pan out to be the number 12. And it would pan out to be 39, but it would give you the number 12 as you added those up. Significance, and I'm not trying to be about no numerology, I'm just talking about how sisters tend to do this stuff. And even if you add it up in a row, 1985, 2017, if you put them on top of each other, added up, it would give you 6,024. And if you added those up, it would still give you a 12 in reference to one of the major presentations that will take place is the significance of the number 12. Now, again, a lot being said there, not to unpack there, because actually if you look at the number 12, it would be 1 and 2, which is a trial. So there's a lot to deal with. So hopefully those of you who are at Savior's Day, maybe if the leadership wants, we could be able to, and if you've completed Incident Command IS 100, if you completed IS 700, if you completed IS Independent Study IS 1300, Introduction to Continuity of Operations, maybe we, under the approval of the leadership, can meet in a room and look at what we need to do to get our people better prepared for what's about to happen. And again, if Brother Paul Muhammad was around to talk about the importance of having radio communications, because I can break out my ham radio, and when the grid goes down, and I can actually get involved with a radio network that could call up to Chicago and find out if my sister's okay. That's if the white boys allow this to happen, because it's their network. We don't have our network to do stuff like that. So we need to do this. So hopefully under the approval of Sister Aurelia Muhammad, maybe we can do something for this Savior's Day. Again, that is the conclusion of my presentation. I would say this in conclusion. if you're listening to this and you want to just be motivated to make it through what's about to happen, go to finalcallradio.com. Listen to finalcallradio.com. Get you 10 or 20 or 15 minutes of that a day, which is short excerpts of the minister giving us guidance. Finalcallradio.com. If you're black, white, go and get you some of that. Finalcallradio.com. I am going to start posting information on a new website that I'm putting up called readyforwhatever.info. Readyforwhatever.info. I can be reached through my local mosque number 5, and that is the conclusion of what I have to say. I'm going to go